on Channel 8 or on the city's website. If you're a council member, please be sure to have your video camera on and be mindful that we are streaming this meeting on Channel 8 and on our city's website. The chat function is disabled to ensure that the public can see all portions of the meeting. The city clerk is the host of this meeting, and I and our IT staff will be the co-host. For tonight's study session, council members and panelists will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Please mute yourself when you have finished speaking to prevent disruptions. This time we'll call the special meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Present.
Councilmember Madera. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Noble.
Present.
Councilmember Wardiola.
Present.
Councilmember Hurst.
Present.
Councilmember Grimes.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to excuse those members not present. Councilwoman Alan Thomas.
I make a motion to approve the members not present.
Councilwoman Grimes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse those members not present. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Madera. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you, sir. We have one item on our agenda, well, actually two items on our agenda. The first is a presentation followed by a resolution related to the presentation. Our presentation is about CARES Act funding options. We'd like to invite Interim City Manager Roger Tinklenberg to introduce the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Dylan, if you would pull up the slide deck, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Give me just one moment.
So I'll be covering basically the overall purpose and then the CARES Act allocations and how much we've spent as of early October. In addition, the additional allocation recommendations and staff resources, and then we'll go to discussion. Next slide. So the city received a CARES Act funding allocation of $4,646,885 from Adams County. And as of October 5, approximately 1.9 million of that 4.6 million was left. And the reason I say approximately, I'll get into some of the detail here in a minute. But the finance department has exact numbers through the end of September, but we attempted to bring in numbers from early October as well for your information. There was discussion among City Council about a desire to direct some additional allocation for community assistance. And so staff is recommending 1.1 million of the CARES Act allocation for those purposes. There's additional balance that will be used for some city operations and police department operations. And we can allocate a considerable amount of salaries for the police department to the CARES Act funding, and that would extinguish much of the remaining money. But we're holding that off until we get more money out into the community. So we're trying to get more money into the community first. So that's kind of background for all of this. Next slide, please. So the funds that have been allocated are shown under the funds allocated line, and that shows 1.5 million. The amounts that have been expended by those different programs are shown in the far right column. So for nonprofit organizations, for example, 200,000 was allocated, 125,000 has been granted out so far. Same thing with mortgage assistance, 500,000 allocated, 73,000, almost 74,000 was expended so far. However, we asterisk that item because there's still 148 applications that are pending, and therefore we expect that 500,000 to be expended shortly. Child care assistance grants, 100,000 was allocated. So far, 32,720 has been granted out. And you can see the following numbers as well. So a total of 1.5 million allocated, 980,000 spent to date. Next slide. On child care assistance, we're not recommending any additional amount because we still have, almost 2/3 of it, well, more than 2/3 of it that's remaining. So our proposal is to continue utilizing that money. Next slide. Nonprofit assistance. Again, there's 73,000 remaining. And so our proposal is to continue using that money and not allocating any additional money towards it. Next slide. So these are some of the items that were discussed by various council members. Our proposal is to allocate this 1.1 million for these 5 different programs. And one of the things that I've asked that the city attorney's office place in the resolution is that we be able to move money between these programs as demand indicates or demand is there, because we'll see more demand very probably in one or more of these programs than in other programs. And so that would give us the flexibility to move that money to meet that community demand. And you can see between small business assistance, restaurant assistance, and the micro loan fund, we're recommending 700,000 of money in that whole category for our various businesses. The other footnote regarding the micro loan program is that we have to be sure that the money can actually be loaned out by CEF before we allocate or we disperse money to them. And that's because the money has to be expended by December 4. And as I mentioned before, we believe that there's possibly up to 750,000 of public safety salaries that can be assigned to this CARES Act funding, and that would extinguish the rest of the money. Next slide. So one of the programs, Assistance for Seniors, we're proposing 250,000 to be placed into that allocation. And this would basically be utilized by 3 different types of assistance. One would be material aid, another would be medical gap programs, and then technology mini grants because people are isolated and need to be able to access services remotely. But again, it's going to depend on the type of programs that are qualified. And Adams County is going through that process right now to determine what programs would be eligible for the CARES Act funding. Next slide. Small business assistance, 250,000. You can see what has been awarded in the first rounds of grants. And so we're recommending 200,000 for the small business grants and then an additional 50,000 for small business assistance programs, which would be PPE dispersions, direct mailings, videos, trainings, and that type of thing. And again, we have to verify their eligibility, that they've paid their sales tax, that they're licensed, actually located in Commerce City, that type of thing. So next slide. For the restaurant industry assistance, we're recommending up to 300,000. And again, that would be aimed at Commerce City-based restaurants, not the nationally owned franchise programs. But again, a Commerce City-based franchisee would be eligible for that funding. And again, what we're trying to do is assist them with information sharing and technical assistance, that type of thing, local promotion. Next slide. Micro loan program, as I mentioned, we have to determine if CEF can actually disperse the money prior to December 4. And so that would be one where we would retain some flexibility in terms of actually the amount that would be allocated to it. Next slide. And then family services, recommending up to $150,000. And this would be for unexpected family expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the number of things that would be included would be uninsured funeral expenses for COVID deaths, unpaid worker sick leave, healthcare premiums for dislocated workers, that type of thing. And again, we're verifying with legal that these type of things would meet the program requirements. Next slide. These programs do take a tremendous amount of staff resources. This is just to give you an idea of the type of steps that go through a grant review program and number of people who are involved in it. And so we want to get the assistance out there, but also want to make council aware that it does take a substantial amount of staff resources to do that. Next slide. This just gives you the hours expended to date on these various programs. Again, the amount of time that it takes, for example, Finance Department, 273 hours, Economic Development, 480 hours, so it takes a substantial amount of time to get those programs out on the street. Next slide. So this is a recap of what we're proposing in terms of the programs, and that's for your discussion. Again, we want to get these programs out there and expend as much as we can to benefit the community. And as I mentioned before, we have a number of expenditures that we know that will be coming through for city operations, whether that's PPE and that type of thing. And then we also have the police department salaries that can be assigned to the CARES Act funding to extinguish the entire 4.6 million. With that, turn it over to City Council for your discussion and direction.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tinklenberg. Mayor Pro Tem?
So Roger, when are they supposed to disperse all those funds?
They're supposed to have them dispersed by December 4. I think, the actual timing depends a little bit on the processing. They've hired some additional staff to be able to increase the number of reviews that are happening.
Okay. And then are home-based businesses included in the small business assistance, or how does that look, or how's that working? Like home-based business?
Yeah, again, they would need to be licensed and be caught up on their sales tax. But other than that, yes. Staff, anyone have anything to offer on that? Michelle or Jody?
Hi,
Sounds
this is,
like I have. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, I just got unmuted. Good evening, everyone. Yes, we haven't worked out what this final round or this fourth round would look like, but since we included home-based businesses in the last round, I don't foresee us not including them in this next round.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Noble?
You've all done a great job with this. Thank you so very much. The assistance to seniors was raised at the Senior Commission on Thursday, and they were all very excited at the opportunity. One of the parts of the conversation that was really interesting was communication. And I think that the child care situation really relates to the fact that we need to get the word out in different ways potentially. And the Senior Commission had great ideas for that, both faith-based as well as schools. They talked about any other nonprofits that could share that information as well. So if we can get the information out in different ways, in addition to the ways that we have been doing it, and maybe even expand beyond where we have thus far, I think that would be really great. So we make sure that we hit everyone, particularly those people who might not have social media, and we want to be able to reach them as well. But thank you so much. And I do know that it takes an incredible amount of work to not only get the information out to everyone, but also then to process the applications. So I really, really do appreciate that. I am curious about the extra work that is reflected in the funds going to public safety. Can you elaborate on that, please?
My understanding, based on conversations with the county, is that all of public safety expenditures during that period of time, during the COVID pandemic, are eligible for reimbursement. So that's what it's based on. But again, we're trying to emphasize programs that benefit the community directly before we extinguish the rest of the 4.6 million internally, basically.
So you're talking about offsetting all of the public safety budget, if you will, since March?
Their salaries, at least, yes.
And in relation to that, I was listening in on a conversation last week with TCHD and Tri-County Health Department, and they indicated that they don't have authority to regulate any of the rules regarding COVID-19 or whether people wear masks or don't wear masks in businesses or not in businesses, that it's really up to the municipalities. And I wondered what plans we have in that regard, because we had sort of been I had been under the impression that it was the opposite, that we needed to go to Tri-County Health if we wanted any of these protocols more closely followed.
The answer to that is a little complicated. In terms of authority, that may very well be correct. They are working on a proposal right now that would give them authority to enforce and to issue fines. So that's in process. In terms of the issue regarding enforcement currently, we've been referring, or at least theoretically anyway, the approach we took was that we would refer to businesses to Tri-County Health. And that was partly due to the recent enactment of legislation at the state level, where it seemed well, I'm searching for words here. It didn't seem to be the appropriate approach for the police department to be issuing fines and citations during this COVID-19 thing in light of the state legislation, where we're trying to avoid contact as much as possible for safety reasons, both for the public and for police officers, and then for them to be issuing citations in a high conflict type of environment didn't seem productive. So we were focusing them on, crimes, not necessarily civil infractions like this, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that it could be used as a tool, particularly when we were talking about the issues involving parks, when there were too many people congregated in a park. So there is an opportunity to use COVID under those particular circumstances. And we could also model for the community best practices and protocol in terms of public relations, public service announcements and that kind of stuff. There was a suggestion that perhaps businesses could even do PSAs for us and ask their customers to comply. So those are all thoughts that could be utilized as well.
Councilman Wadiola?
Thank you, Mayor. Roger, there's no sound on the Channel 8 internet stream, just FYI. I
Yes.
just got it. Also,
I just forwarded that to Justin. Thank you.
okay, cool. You know, thanks for doing all this, and I agree with most of it. I just want to see where we could help our residents with utilities. This brings back that issue that me and you talked about, that lady whose pipe broke, $3,000 water bill, and you know, they gave her a break to $1,800, but that's still a hefty bill. Where could we, or I'm thinking maybe assistance for seniors and family service, where we could reach out to South Adams, Excel, and United to see how we could do that. Because I think the restaurant one is great, small business, everything's good, but we're not really helping the residents in a way other than the rent and mortgage. And the rent and mortgage is the big picture, don't get me wrong, but you know, when you have a water bill that's $1,000 or a utilities bill, Excel. I know working in the schools, we have a LEAP program with Excel for our students with low income that I refer them, and LEAP is low efficient assistant program, which helps with their Excel bill. I'm just trying to see where we could allocate something like that for residents that have some outstanding, I mean, you know, some, for example, a couple of folks that I talked to paid rent, but haven't paid their water bill in 2 months. So where would that be? Or could we brainstorm? Because I don't want you guys to go back and try to research it all, because we need to get this money out. But I'm thinking if we could include it somehow in family services and assistance with seniors, especially who are on a fixed income more than likely, that. So I'm just throwing that out there to see what we could do to impact our residents.
Unfortunately, utilities just offhand are not eligible, and that's in the Treasury guidelines. So, you know, anything that we give money to has to be COVID-19 related or caused by, or, you know, that type of thing. So if they were out of work, for example, then again, we can assist them from the standpoint of this family assistance program that we're talking about, but specifically for utilities directly, no, we could not do that. So I would defer to Matt if he has any other information that he could share on that, but that's my understanding offhand.
No, I'm sorry, Roger, your statement is absolutely correct. You know, if we set up a program to provide some sort of financial assistance to people who have lost their job directly related to COVID, and then they in turn use that to pay a utility bill, that's fine. But we have to be very circumscript in how we spend that money, make sure it meets the requisite criteria under the Act.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hurst.
Apologize. Jose, I just wanted to point out, I saw at work, Excel Energy was doing a presentation about how their programs that are helping people, kind of directly what you're talking about. So I think that's why they were specifically excluded. Utility companies are getting CARES Act dollars to have programs like this. So I believe those exclusions come because of that. And so they have specific ways that they're going to be doing that. So I just pulled up Excel Energy's website real quick, and it looks like there's a couple options. Just depends on what situation you're in. So maybe we can put that out on social media as well.
And thank you for that, Councilman Hurst. And I think maybe putting a resource page, Roger, where our residents could go to Excel United if those exist. Thank you, though.
Any other questions regarding the presentation? Seeing none, would like to thank you guys for putting this together as quickly as you did. I know it was a last minute thing and appreciate the scheduling of the special meeting so that we can address this this week as opposed to waiting till next. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-84. Councilman Hurst
So moved.
and Councilwoman Noble.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-84. Is there any discussion? Councilman Hurst.
Apologize. Hand is coming down now. That was left from the last one.
Councilwoman Noble. Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Resolution 2020-84, resolution prioritizing CARES Act fund expenditures to maximize the benefits to the business and residents of Commerce City. Councilmember Madera, Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes 8-0.
Thank you. And thank you again, everybody who got this all together as quickly as possible so that we can get these programs up and running. It's going to be critically important should our case numbers not go the direction that we would like them to go and the state mandates action be taken by Tri-County Health concerning our county. With that, we are